So this week, we're going to talk about ethics and sustainability in the small business. And the approach that I take here is a little bit more applied because, let's be honest, I could talk to you about the differences, or I could tell you about the differences between deontological ethics and utilitarianism, but what does that mean for your business? Not much. What's better is to talk about policies, procedures, and really things that you can and should be doing and not doing in order to not alienate your customers. And so when we're talking about business ethics involves principles and standards guiding behavior in the world of business. So things like transparency, honesty, fairness, those are the types of values that customers want to see from your business. And with respect to small business, what is really important to your customers is trust. They want to know that when you say you will do something, or when you say that your product works in a certain way, that it will, and if it doesn't, that you will back it up so that they can get their money back, they can do an exchange, so that they know that when they're working with you, they are buying something that is either going to last, or maybe you're making a product that isn't designed to last. That's a whole other thing. But if that's the case, you're honest and transparent about it. Also, reputation building. Companies now live or die by Google reviews. If you have anything less than 4.5, that's not good. And I would even say 4.5 is not good. I look for companies that have solid 5-star reviews, and that's who I want to do business with. And I do look at reviews prior to doing business with a company for the first time, especially certain types of companies like anything related to travel or hospitality, so restaurants, hotels, things like that. Anything related to tourism as well. Not so much product-based stuff, but if I go on Amazon, I'm definitely going to look at the product reviews before I buy something. So Google for service-based businesses. If you're selling on a platform like Amazon, then those Amazon reviews definitely are going to matter as well. And ultimately, the long-term viability of your business is going to be built on trust, your reputation, your transparency, and the fairness that you demonstrate to your customers. So I'm going to talk over the next, 2 slides. I've got a few slides that relate to small business issues that tend to involve ethics. Some of these might be repetitive, but that's okay. We can always, circle back to things. That's important. The first thing is misleading advertising. You need to make sure that your advertising is correct. I have the algorithm on Airbnb indicates to potential travelers that my house is a 2-minute walk to Buccaneer Beach. There is no way in hell my house is a 2-minute walk to Buccaneer Beach. Even if I'm walking fast, it's 15 minutes. Unfortunately, because of the algorithm, there's no way for me to correct that. So what I have to do is in my listing, I have to very clearly state, the algorithm is incorrect about proximity to Buccaneer Beach. It is a 15-minute walk to Buccaneer Beach from my house. And the reason why I do that is I don't want somebody to book my place thinking that they're going to be close to a really cool beach in a park when they're not. They're going to have to either get in a car or they're going to have a much longer walk. So you want to make sure that what you're advertising is commensurate with what you're selling. Congruent, I should say. Labor practices. I remember my first job, the first job that I applied for, the first thing that the woman said, it was a service job, and the woman said to me in the interview, I don't have to pay you minimum wage, and I'm not going to. It was really nice that she was transparent with me like that, but it also indicated to me that this was somebody that I didn't want to work for. Because if you're not even willing to pay me what the minimum is or the prevailing wage, why would I want to do that? And so I took a pass on that job. And it's a good thing that I did, because I had friends that worked at the same place, and yeah, she was not a nice person. Bribery and corruption, you tend to come across these types of issues when you're doing business overseas. There are certain places in the world where they expect you to make payments to grease the wheels. That's referred to as a grease payment, which, by the way, grease payments aren't technically illegal. They may be unethical, but you do tend to run into certain types of issues in different parts of the world. And so it's just something that you need to be aware of. And there are certainly places in the world where it's expected. And there's a law in the United States called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is currently not being enforced by the current administration. But when it is enforced, if you are somewhere where bribery is part of that culture, technically it's not illegal for you to engage in that. Whole other can of worms, like I said, grease payments, bribery, something that you need to be aware of, especially if you're doing business around the world. Conflicts of interest happen a lot in business, and the most important thing about a conflict of interest is to just be transparent and to disclose those when you have them. So just, a couple of examples of ethical challenges that we face in business. Let's say that you're a small bakery and you make wonderful pastries, but you're not the best photographer. And so rather than photograph your own images for your website, you maybe even go and use licensed images, or, even using licensed, the example says unlicensed images, but even when you're using licensed images, if it's not yours and it's not transparent, you could actually have a warranty issue, because when I go to your website and I see what something looks like and I go and order that, I expect to get something that looks like that. So using images, you have to make sure that they are your own. If they're unlicensed, then you need to pay for them so that you get licensed, because the issue that comes up with, you'll be on the losing end of a civil suit, and your reputation will suffer as a result of that. That was a lot. All right, that was a lot. So some additional small business issues, deceptive and misleading claims. You want to make sure that you can back up everything that you say that your product does or is. I already talked about truth in advertising. Customer privacy and data. There is a lot of trade of customer lists. Your customer list is an important piece of intellectual property, but there are laws that relate to what you can do with your customer data, and your customers have to consent to what you do with their data. Fair pricing and value. You want to price your products in a way that's commensurate with the value that you're providing. What we see a lot of times, especially after things like natural disasters or if there are market shortages, is vendors will start to raise the price unscrupulously, and that never generally ends well for the vendor. They may win in the short term by getting a few extra bucks in their pockets, but the negative press and sometimes criminal charges that come out as a result. I'm thinking about like COVID, when vendors were charging excessive prices for like things like toilet paper. There were some prosecutions related to that. And so as a business person, you have to think long term in terms of what you're doing from an ethical perspective. Promoting social responsibility is always a good thing. You want to be a good and ethical, upstanding corporate citizen. Product ingredients and sources. If you have if there are things that go into your products, or if you are sourcing them from areas that are questionable, I know there are parts of the world that may make a lot of cheap products, but a lot of customers, when they find out that you're purchasing from those areas, may have issues with that. And so you want to be clear about where you're getting things from. You definitely don't want to say something's made in the USA when it's not. You want to be clear about what's going into your products, especially if there's something that can be potentially harmful in food or in things like toys. So you want to be upfront about that. Vulnerable groups. It's really nice to say that you're getting a supply from somewhere because it's cheap labor, but also understand what the implication of cheap labor means. Yeah, you might be able to say that you can charge a lower price. That's what a lot of those fast fashion companies do. Places like Shein, H&M is doing a little bit better, but they were known for that. Zara is another one. That's a very controversial business practice. And so just be aware of that there are people, if you engage in those types of practices, that aren't going to want to patronize your business. And then finally, you want to make sure that your marketing, your products, everything that you're doing is culturally sensitive. There's a topic that's referred to as cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is when you go and, so I had that business idea generator where you import something from another place. So cultural appropriation would be like, let's say that I go to, I'm thinking of one that I don't want to share because it's a very popular company. Yeah, okay, I'll do a different one. So Vans. Vans shoes, I love my Vans shoes. They have a line of products that is designed to commemorate Dia de los Muertos. And so every year around Dia de los Muertos, Vans releases these limited edition shoes. Well, Vans is a California company. They don't really have anything to do with the Mexican culture and heritage. And unless a piece of the revenue from that, from those products is going to causes that support the Hispanic people, you might say that that's some cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is different than cultural appreciation. I might buy those shoes as a innocent consumer because I love the Mexican culture. Okay, I might be appreciating the culture. The company, though, is appropriating the culture. And there is an ethical issue there that as a business person, you need to be aware of. You want to make sure that what you're doing is sensitive to culture and you're not taking advantage of a culture just for your own profitability. When you do come upon an ethical concern, the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you identify the issue and that it's actually an issue. There are a lot of things that come up that, aren't necessarily a big deal in the scheme of things. But if it's an issue with customers, employees, suppliers, or if you know that reading about it on the front page of the newspaper is going to be potentially harmful for your business, then it's an issue. You need to consider the stakeholders who are involved, who will be impacted by the issue. So that is, your stakeholders is anybody that is impacted by your business, customers, suppliers, employees, your board of directors, your investors. Those are all, a lot of times the local community, those are all stakeholders in your business, and they are impacted by the decisions that you make. Think about alternatives. What alternatives do you have to make a different decision or to change the course of the issue? And then finally, once you make a decision, you want to make sure that you reflect on that decision and think about whether or not you would do it again given the same circumstances. Hopefully, the decisions that you make are decisions that you would repeat. Moving on to sustainability. Sustainability is basically this concept that we make products and deliver services that have what's called a triple bottom line. Triple bottom line means that you're doing something that's going to benefit people, so there is a social impact to your product or service. You are making decisions that are environmentally sustainable, and that are profitable for your business. An example of this off the top of my head is Subaru. So every Subaru that rolls off the assembly line generates less waste than you're generating in your kitchen right now. Subaru is a zero waste company. So everything that they use in the car is either reused or recycled. And they have been doing this for, I want to say like 15 years. Not a lot of people know this about Subaru. The other thing that Subaru does for the social side is a couple of times a year when you buy a Subaru, they will donate to a cause of your choice. So like the Humane Society or some environmental cause, I can't remember, like the Sierra Club, something like that. But with all of these things that Subaru is doing, they are still a profitable company because they have to make a profit to, one, stay in business and to return value to their shareholders. Why does sustainability matter? Because we are facing very real issues of climate change. Resources are becoming increasingly scarce. They're water. If we run out of fresh water, we're going to have to desalinate it from the ocean. Desalinating it from the ocean causes environmental damage, and it's kind of expensive. And so these resources that we have, especially raw materials, we have to understand that these are finite resources. So if you are in the operation of your business, doing something that could be more sustainable, like for example, instead of using plastic bottles in my Airbnb or plastic cups, I have paper, I have metal, and so I give people lots of options that aren't plastic. And then we also know that customers have expectations that businesses are not going to be harmful to the planet or to people. There is a lot of data out there that supports this idea that people purchase products from companies that are sustainable. People look for positive environmental impact. So the benefits of sustainable practices, there are cost savings involved. Like I said with Subaru, it took them a long time to figure that out, but once they did, they saved money every year in not sending stuff to landfills and not paying material recyclers to come and get their extra scrap metal. People are brand loyal when they know that the companies that they're doing business with are doing the right thing. And it enables access to new markets in terms of new customer groups, new geographical markets, and new target segments. So in terms of small business strategies that we can all implement that will help to make us sustainable, number one is if we can all look for areas to reduce our waste. Recycling, like I said, is a big one. Just in mine, like I don't have plastic cups. I got paper and I got metal. And so if you're looking for a plastic cup, you're going to have to go to the store and get one because I don't have them here. The red Solo cups, we don't have red Solo cups in my Airbnb. Source your products locally if possible. There are lots of benefits, especially environmental and social as well, to identifying and using local suppliers or as local as you can get. If you're in the clothing business, maybe your local supplier is going to be in Los Angeles. That's still pretty local when your other option is like China, Vietnam, India, somewhere like that. Using renewable energy if possible. There's a lot about, solar and wind and all of these other things. In some places that's practical, in other places it's not. In Southern California, solar energy is extremely practical for the most part. Excuse me. Is extremely practical for the most part. And so just thinking about what you can do in terms of renewables, in terms of energy. And then green packaging. Making sure that the packaging that you use doesn't create a lot of bulk doesn't create a lot of environmental harm on its own. So one of the things that people don't realize is actually pretty harmful are those canvas shopping bags that you get, that businesses will give you instead of giving you a paper shopping bag, or they'll sell you a canvas shopping bag, a lot of those book bags. Well, a lot of those actually don't have a ton of benefit for the environment. I'm going to post actually a reading on that topic, because I think it's really fascinating that we think that something's environmentally friendly, but it's not. It's a New York Times article. I got to go find that and I'll source it for you. And then you want to make sure that your supply chains and your suppliers are sustainable as well. So you want to vet them. Where are they getting their products from? What practices are they using? Are they a fair trade certified organization? Are they a fair trade partner? People will pay more for fair trade practices. And then local versus global sourcing. I know I just told you that sourcing local is great, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes you have to go global, and that's understandable. So maybe you source local where you can, and you go global when you need to. In terms of social responsibility, finding ways to give back to the community. I've talked about that a little bit. Having labor practices that are ethical and fair to your employees. Pay people what they're worth. I pay my cleaners more than I need to, more than the market rate, but they're worth it. My place is immaculate. And people, and for 5 years now, it still looks like it's brand new. There's not a lot of vacation rentals that you can go in and say that. Mine gets pretty busy. And so, I only have a couple of open days a month. And that's a lot of wear and tear, but it still looks brand new because I pay people who take care of my place, and I pay them to take care of my place. And I do it myself sometimes, which I don't pay myself very well, but that's a different story. And then you just want to make sure also that you are being inclusive and you are honoring the diversity of your community and your employee groups. Just understanding that people, that your customers and your suppliers and the people that are impacted by your business and the people that patronize your business are not going to be all the same as you. And so recognizing that and having policies and procedures in place that respect that is only going to be a good thing. And then some certifications and tools that businesses use for sustainability and to demonstrate that they're sustainable and that they are ethical in their business practices. I already talked about B Corps. LEED is environmental design. The Green Business Bureau is really about creating sustainable and environmentally friendly businesses. And then there's also going to be a lot of local programs no matter where you are. The SBDC is a great place to learn about these things because a lot of times, I think I talked about my brother and a grant that he was getting from the state of California for his engines. There's lots of, and that's basically to make his boat more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, so he's burning less diesel, blah, 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 blah. So always look for local programs as well. And then don't forget that there's always going to be consumer expectations and trends that lend themselves toward being more ethically and sustainably minded. There's lots of data out there that says millennials and Gen Zs, which I assume most of you are, prefer meaningful work and transparency and generally tend to have a value-based culture. Not quite sure how that jives with all the stuff my kid is watching on YouTube Shorts about Labubu's and things like that, but evidently that's the case. And so, understanding, that if you're not if you are a company that is violating these types of practices, that your millennial and Gen Z's employees, customers, and stakeholders are going to put you on blast. So just be aware of that. And I don't know, I think that there is a rise of ethical consumption. Like I said, now people are starting to question like the fast fashion brands like the Sheins and the Temus, or not the Temu's something else. But do you really need to buy 16 water bottles, or do you need to have 16 Stanley cups in your kitchen, or is just one okay? Maybe two. I've got 0 and I'm kind of proud of that. But think about, your level of consumption. Every Stanley cup that you buy is one that you're going to have to store. Eventually, when you need a new Stanley, because the color that you got isn't a favorite anymore, you're going to have to do something with that. Does it recycle? Can you sell it? Can you donate it to somebody who might need a Stanley? I don't know. Just some things to think about. And so that kind of wraps up that lecture. Think about the impact of your business decisions always. Like I said, my thing is, how would I feel if I read about my decision on the front of the newspaper? And would I be emboldened by that, or would I be embarrassed by that, or would I be going out of business or potentially to jail as a result of my decision? So just all important things to think about as you work your way through as an entrepreneur.